Hey folks, Mr. Olson here. Let's do some econ as a quick warm up. Which inner rectangle is larger? The one on the left hand side or the one on the right hand side? The answer is they're actually the same size. The black rectangle and white rectangle are same size. All right, so today we are looking at the market structure of monopolistic competition. If we put it on our spectrum of the four market structures, it's going to go right there. So it's going to be closer to perfect competition and more competitive than oligopoly, but less competitive than perfect competition. In monopolistically competitive industries, there's a relatively large number of sellers. Usually we say there are hundreds of sellers that are competing in that particular market. Monopolistic competition has differentiated products. This is the key characteristic that's going to separate it out from perfect competition. Unlike perfect competition, where the products were identical, in monopolistic competition, the products are differentiated, which means they're slightly different. And in fact, firms work really, really hard to make their products be slightly different from their competitors. Monopolistically competitive firms have some control over the price, so they are price makers. Um, and there is easy entry and exits into the market. In other words, there are low barriers to entry. Okay, so in that sense, it's more like perfect competition. There's a lot of non-price competition. So in order to prevent having to lower their price, monopolistically competitive firms are going to compete with their competitors in as many ways as possible without adjusting their price. And the most common example of that is advertising. So what are examples of monopolistically competitive industries? Fast food restaurants are a great example. Furniture companies, jewelry stores, hair salons, clothing manufacturers. In all these markets, there are dozens, if not hundreds of firms competing. There's lots of advertising. There's slightly differentiated products. And the barriers to entry are relatively low. So monopolistic competition sort of combines some perfect competition characteristics with some monopolistic characteristics. So what is similar about monopolistic competition and monopolies? Number one, they do have control over the price. Okay, so they are price makers. Because monopolistically competitive firms are price makers, their demand curves are going to be greater than their marginal revenue curves. There's going to be lots of advertising. Many monopolies advertise. Monopolistic competition has lots and lots of advertising. Monopolistically competitive firms are not going to be efficient. They're going to be neither productively efficient nor allocatively efficient. And we'll show that on the graph a little bit later today. On the other hand, this market structure does share some characteristics with perfect competition. There are a large number of smaller firms in this market structure. There's low barriers to entry. In other words, it's relatively easy to enter and exit the market. And because of that, there's going to be zero economic profit in the long run. So this is the biggest similarity with perfect competition. In the long run, because firms can enter and exit, there's going to be zero economic profit in the long run. So what do we mean by differentiated products? Okay, it's really essential that we understand that the goods that these firms are selling are not identical. So because they're not selling identical products, firms are going to seek to capture a piece of the market by making their goods seem as unique as possible. And they're going to want to produce where marginal cost equals marginal revenue. So they don't want to change their price. So they're going to look for ways to differentiate their product using non-price competition. What are examples of non-price competition? What are ways that we can make our product stand out and more attractive besides simply lowering the price? Okay, developing our brand name and attractive packaging are really, really valuable ways to compete with our competitors besides lowering the price. So think about national brand names that you recognize and that you automatically give a certain trust or certain value with when you associate with it. Adding particular product attributes including really, really good service when you come to us. So maybe your restaurant, maybe you're a Mexican restaurant and your food is good, but it's kind of like everyone else's, but your service is amazing, right? The waiters are really attentive. They remember your name when you come in, and that's going to help you make your restaurant stand out from all the other guys. Location is a way that you can make yourself stand out. And advertising is the most important type of non-price competition. And as economists, when we discuss advertising, we're going to point out that there are two goals to advertising. Number one, to increase the demand for your product. And then number two, to make the demand more inelastic. So you can actually advertise to your existing customers to make their demand for your product more inelastic, in addition to increasing your overall demand. Product differentiation is huge. This infographic, if you want to pause it and check it out in more detail, you can. It's pretty amazing. It shows all these parent companies that control all these different actual individual brands. And a lot of times as consumers, we think we're having lots of choice. We're choosing among different competitors. But in reality, what PG&E does, P&G does, for example, is use Gillette and Old Spice to segment out different parts of the population and to create some brand loyalty, when in reality it is the same producer who's making those products. So some pretty interesting, surprising connections you may make on this infographic. All right, now let's get to the graph. So those are all the characteristics of monopolistic competition. Let's actually talk about how we draw this bad boy. All right, so like we already said, they're price makers. Monopolistic and competitive firms are going to face the same cost curves than everyone else. So no matter which of the four market structures you're in, we're always going to draw the cost curves the same. We have a downward sloping demand, for our cost curves. We have a marginal cost curve that goes down because of the benefits of specialization, and then goes up because of the law of diminishing marginal returns. We have an average total cost curve that comes down, hits a minimum when it crosses the marginal cost curve, and then goes up. And in this case, because we're monopolistically competitive, because we're price makers, we have a downward sloping demand curve, and then a marginal revenue curve that is twice as steep. So taking a look at this scenario, we could see that this profit maximizing firm would set an output where MR equals MC, go up to the demand curve to find our price, go down to the ATC to find this nice green area of profit. What you are looking at right now is a monopolistically competitive firm that is making a short run profit. Okay, so in the short run, I want you to realize that this is exactly the same graph as a monopoly graph. There's no way we could differentiate that yet. In the short run, a monopolistically competitive firm is exactly the same as a monopoly, and in this case, it's the same as a monopoly making a profit. Okay. Here's the difference for this particular market structure. In the long run, firms are going to enter, and when other firms enter our industry, that's going to drive down our demand for firms that are already in the market. Okay, so here comes the long run adjustment. So we're enjoying a nice profit, okay, in the short run. Because we're enjoying a profit, we're going to attract other firms to enter the industry, which is going to lower our individual demand for this particular firm. So here's the starting point again. As other firms enter, there's going to be more substitutes for our product, which is going to lower our demand curve until we reach zero economic profit. So our demand is going to fall until our profit maximizing quantity is such that price equals ATC at our profit maximizing quantity. In other words, we're making zero economic profit, and our total revenue equals our total cost. This is when we are in long run equilibrium, because there's no longer an incentive for firms to leave the market. There's no longer an incentive for firms to enter the market. Okay, that is long run equilibrium. The quantity, where marginal cost equals marginal revenue, up to is right directly below where price equals the ATC. Okay, and that's where we're eventually going to settle in the long run. So let's explain in a little bit more detail why we shifted the demand curves in the way that we did. In the short run, if profits are being made, what's going to happen? Other firms are going to enter. When new firms enter, that means for the particular uh, firm that you were drawing, there's going to be more close substitutes and less market share for our existing firm, which means the demand is going to fall for each firm. Okay. On the other hand, if short run losses were being made, what's going to happen? Well, it would be the opposite scenario. If short run losses are being made, firms are going to exit, which is going to result in fewer substitutes and more market share for the remaining firms, and the demand for the firms that remain in the market is going to increase until we reach that long run equilibrium again. Okay, so let's visually look at the graph for the scenario where there is a loss. Taking a look at this, you should by now be really able to spot really quickly that this firm would be earning a loss equal to that green rectangle right there. This is a monopolistically competitive firm earning a loss in the short run. What's going to happen in the long run? Firms are going to leave the industry. Okay, firms are going to leave the industry until our demand has increased enough where we are earning zero economic profit. So in the long run, firms are going to leave, driving up our demand. Our demand's also going to become more inelastic because we're losing substitutes as other firms leave. And I'm showing the animation a couple times over again. You can see here was the original starting point with a loss. As firms leave, our demand's going to increase until we make zero economic profit, where our price and quantity increase for us as an individual firm, and our total revenue equals our total cost. So next question we're going to address is, given those characteristics, especially in the long run, are monopolistically competitive firms efficient? Okay, take a look at our scenario. You can see that we are a monopolistically competitive firm in long run equilibrium, and you can also see that we are not allocatively efficient because our price does not equal marginal cost. This is the point where price would equal marginal cost, where our marginal benefit to society would equal our marginal cost, and we are not at that output. We are at a lower output here, and in fact, you can see that at our profit maximizing quantity, the marginal benefit to society is greater than the marginal cost for the firm. So we're not allocatively efficient. We are also not productively efficient because we're not at an output where where our ATC is at a minimum. So we know our ATC curve is going to hit a minimum when the marginal cost curve crosses it. We are producing at a quantity where our ATC is higher than that. So we're not productively efficient. Our per unit cost of production is higher than it could be because we're profit maximizers. So we're not productively efficient. So as you can see here, in the long run, monopolistically competitive firms are neither allocatively efficient nor productively efficient. Okay. Finally, let's talk about this new term called excess capacity. So this firm also has something called excess capacity. What is excess capacity? It means that given the current resources, the firm could produce at its lowest cost, but they decide not to. Our lowest cost would be if we produce at a quantity where we're at our minimum ATC. And that's not what we're doing. So we can actually quantify the excess capacity of any given firm. And that's going to be the quantity gap or the output gap between where our minimum ATC is and our profit maximizing output. Okay. And I'll show you on the graph in a second, but we can actually see that monopolistically competitive firms have excess capacity. And it's the difference between our minimum ATC and our profit maximizing quantity. This is something that's slightly different than the amount underproduced. When we use the term underproduced, we're talking about allocative efficiency. So the difference between our profit maximizing quantity and our allocatively efficient output would be the amount that we're underproducing. That's slightly different than excess capacity, which is the difference between our profit maximizing quantity and our minimum ATC. So looking at the graph here, you can see that we have an excess capacity equal to this distance. It's the gap between our profit maximizing quantity and then the quantity at which our cost would be a minimum, which is the minimum ATC right there. So let's do a couple practice questions. Go ahead and pause the video, see if you're getting it. and select your best answer choice. Best answer choice for this one is B as in boy. If we're in long run equilibrium, if the firm were to realize productive efficiency, it would have a loss. Let's go back to the graph and look at that. So here's the monopolistically competitive firm. In the long run, we are looking for the productive efficiency point, which is right here. So if it were to produce at a quantity that's productively efficient, its revenue, or excuse me, its cost would be here and its revenue would be down here. So there we would be making a loss because our total cost would be greater than our total revenue if we were to produce at that quantity. Next question, go ahead and pause the video and select your answer choice. The correct answer choice is C. So in long run equilibrium, we have excess capacity and our output price exceeds our marginal cost, even though we're making zero economic profit. Let's look at the graph and see if we can see on the graph what we mean by our output price exceeds our marginal cost. So looking at this particular graph, our output price is PLR, which is going to be up here, which is greater than our marginal cost. So at our output, our price is up here and our marginal cost is only right here. So that's what we mean by our price exceeds our marginal cost. All right, ladies and gentlemen, one more little riddle for you here. What figure should replace the question mark? So given the pattern established, can you analyze and predict which figure should replace the question mark? If you think you know, let me know when you come back to class. And then the last item, in addition to this little riddle for you, is this little review slide. So after watching the screencast, you should now be able to, and also this is a review from last week as well as the screencast. You should now be able to do these 8 items. And if you have questions about any of these, I'd love to answer them when you come back to class. Thanks for listening. Have a great day.